Hello, Jenna Dalton from Sweet Mom Bod here. Welcome. I am here with my friend, Jenna Denton House. She's a professionally trained marriage coach. She helps married women take sex off their to-do list by showing them how to want and enjoy it more, which I feel like if you have a baby, regardless how old that baby is or babies, this is something that we can all use. So welcome, Jenna.
Thank you, Jenna. I love our
Yay.
name.
I know, right?
Combo.
That's like kind of how our friendship started. It's really like, hey, we almost have the same name. Let's be friends.
And our last names even start with D. How cool is
Exactly.
that?
Yeah. Well, just meant to be.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jenna, for having me on here. I love talking about sex, so let's do this.
Yay. All right. Well, let's dive in. So, to give the audience a little bit of background on you and how you came into this, because your story, of course, I know your story, and your story is similar to my story and a lot of other people's stories when they get into the line of work that they're in because something in their lives was not working, and then they figured out how to fix it or how to mend it or how to heal it, and now they want to help other people. So tell us a little bit about where you came from and where you're at now.
Whew. Okay, let's see how I can shorten it up a little bit. So the big surprise of my life and the like party shocker that I have, other than flipping my eyelids inside out, is that I got married when I was 17, and I wasn't part of some weird religious cult or anything, so don't worry. But I beat the odds. I've been now married for 17 years, which means I've now been married, like, how do we say this? Like, I've been married the same amount of time. I've been married half my life. So marriage was hard, really, really hard. But sex was like the thing that we fought about, like the main thing. I just didn't really enjoy it, didn't really crave it or want it like I thought I should. And my husband did. And so we were in that real classic, I wanted it like rarely, and he wanted it all the time, and we just basically fought about it. We didn't understand why. We eventually 5 years into our marriage went to see a counselor, had the first really awkward conversation. I wasn't always as comfortable talking about sex. Asked me about masturbation and stuff. I was like, oh my God, I just want to run out of here. Made it through that first session, thankfully, and then went on to like lots of other people, like therapists and workshops, and I kind of became obsessed a little bit about it. I eventually became a marriage coach because it was a marriage coach who really helped us a lot, even more than the people we paid thousands of dollars to go see. And I started working with couples. And during that time, I was still really working on our sex life, because even though we had gotten a lot of help, nothing really was working in the long term for us. And so I was like, this is ridiculous. I have all this knowledge, all these tools. I'm going to solve this for myself. And so I just got really hardcore about it. And I started essentially creating a program for myself that I would later turn into a program for other women. And it worked.
Yay! Now you want it all the time. Well, maybe not.
In a realistic, I hope we can talk about that a little bit more, but it's, the way we're taught that we should want it is actually not the way it actually looks in real life. So I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yes, let's get into it. That's a great segue. Let's get into that now. So in kind of the society that you and I are brought up in, and that a lot of girls and women are brought up in, it's this idea that men are the aggressors and we're the submissive ones, and we should just kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, just like lay there and the men can have at it. And that, like, even just saying that feels so icky and not fun at all. So obviously something needs to change, right?
Oh my goodness. The problems are so systemic, but let's not go down that dark hole, because there are things that we can actually do that will make a huge difference. But I think it's really good to just acknowledge that we live in a messed up culture when it comes to sex.
Yeah.
It's messed up from our childhood, messages from don't look, don't touch. I hope us moms are changing that with our kids. From religious messages of shame, to cultural messages of your body is a sexual object for other people's gratification, viewing pleasure, and also physical pleasure. You know, we've got all this stuff to contend with. So it's good to just acknowledge it. This is what we have. So back to the wanting it will look different, is that we are so conditioned to think that TV sex is actually real sex. But when you really think about it, who are the producers of TV sex? They're men. They're men. And they're also men who aren't very well educated. Because I really think the media model of sexuality is a kind of a distorted male sexuality. So it's not real male sexuality, but it's a distorted, it's kind of like a 13-year-old uneducated boy kind of sexuality.
Yes.
So what we're trying to do, as women, as ladies, who are created very differently and who are very intuitive, we're trying to fit ourselves into this tiny little narrow box that we're taught. And inside of that tiny little narrow box is something that tells us that we should want sex spontaneously.
Yes.
So that we should, you know, just be doing dishes and then all of a sudden be like, want some sex?
Yeah.
You know, and text your husband like a little sex emoji or whatever. You know, he comes in the door and you're like, can't wait to just like rip off his clothes and like, you're so like tingly and hot and like juices are flowing and like everything just works so magically. And we keep on thinking that we're broken because that's not what we want.
Yeah.
But what is more true, and I learned about this in the book Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. She is amazing. She's a professor. She talks about sex. She's got blue hair. She's at a TED Talk. I mean, she's super cool.
Yeah.
So cool. I mean, let me show you the like just even look at the it's such a cool,
yeah,
like,
I love
it's a purse.
Yeah.
I love it. She's great. So she taught me this originally, is that most women have responsive desire. Actually, only 30% of women have spontaneous desire, which is the whole ripping the clothes off. Yeah. So we just need to settle in to the fact that usually women need to be in the sexual experience to start to feel the sexy feelings.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong or broken or anything about that. It's kind of like, you know, you like yoga, you like the feeling when you get to yoga, you like the feeling after yoga, but sometimes you just don't want to get your yoga mat and walk out the door. But you do, and it feels great, and it really works great for everyone.
I love that. That's such a good way of putting it. So along the same lines then, so if we're not like kind of meant to just we're doing this kind of thing and we need a little bit of a warm up, so to speak, or anything like that, should we, if say our men are instigating the sexual experience but we're not really feeling it initially, should we keep going along and assume at some point we're going to get turned on, we're going to be into it? Like, how do we know when going with the flow and just kind of seeing how things are is healthy, and how can we separate that from we feel like it's a forced, unhappy, unliked situation?
There are so many layers to this answer, so I'll try to be clear. I'll try to be simple as possible. So it really depends on where you're at emotionally. So if you have been in the real defensive, like no stage for quite some time, like if your husband is very assertive, very gropey, you know, slapping your butt in the kitchen, you're like, and he's grabbing your boobs and you're like, then I really recommend that you take a period of time and you ask him not to initiate. So some breathing room, just some breathing room. And during that time, you might want to say, like, you might even give yourself like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and just say, I need a break from this pattern, this dynamic we're in. And you might even ask for not having sex. Like, you know, your husband will be okay. But if you're kind of on the other end of the spectrum and you're like, I don't really need that, just ask him not to initiate. But what you can do is then schedule it.
Mhm.
So like once a week, you know, that, you know, my husband and I do it on a Saturday morning. We have for quite some time. And I know, super sexy, eh?
Awesome.
But
I love
this is a new, like this, we're doing something new. We're, you know, we're creating new things now and new definitions, not the media driven
it.
definition.
Yeah.
And so schedule it, ask him not to initiate, and just give yourself this like breathing room. And he'll feel so much more relaxed because he'll know it's coming and he won't feel so panicky about, because sex for men is about connection.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like when we have a good like a heart to heart with our husbands, you know how
Yeah.
that feels?
Yeah.
It just feels great.
Yeah.
That's what sex does for men. So
Uh,
you can see it can get kind of panicky and scary for them if they feel like they don't know when that's going to happen. So
yeah.
that's when I see men can get kind of like gropey and a little bit needy.
Yeah.
So yeah, let them know what's going to happen, ask for a little bit of a break. And then if you feel like initiating or you feel like you want to snuggle or just have a little quick grope or something, then you don't have to worry that it's going to always be, you're going to have pressure to like finish the deed, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So many good things in that. I think one of the things that I definitely want to touch on is the understanding from the man's perspective that like sex for the men isn't always about like they just want to get off and get out of there. Like there's that connection. Like they want to feel that connection to us as well. And I think having that open, honest conversation with our husbands, because like 99.9% of issues in any relationship, whether it's a marriage or not, usually comes down to communication. And someone saying, oh, well, I thought you wanted this. And you saying, well, I thought that you wanted this. And talking about it, being open and honest about it, you may, I feel like, be surprised at what your husband has to say. Hey?
Oh my gosh, this is huge. This is the biggest misconception that I find that women have. Like they really feel like men just come out of their like man caves and they're just like, me want sex. Me need orgasm. Give me sex. And I think that that is perpetuated by the media.
Yes.
So we need to just take a step back for a minute and actually look at the true reality, what's going on. The true reality is that men at age 4, boys at age 4 are, and there's been research done on this, are start to be touched less. And especially our generation, I think the generation coming up, like our boys, I don't have boys, but I've heard of other moms, they're touching their boys more. They're
Yeah.
giving them more snuggles, or they're making it okay. They're not shaming them.
Yeah.
But even so, at age 4, boys are hugged less by their parents. It's seen less appropriate to touch their peers, their friends. And so the only two kind of socially acceptable ways to get touch are to be physically aggressive, roughhouse, get violent even, and sex.
Yeah.
And so then you get, but it really stems from that need of touch that we all have. And then you go into teen years, and then you watch movie, and then porn sometimes gets into the picture, and it's just like kind of this big soup. It's a big mess. So number one, I think it's really important for us to have compassion with what our husbands have gone through, that they are actually in a touch deficit when they come to our marriage. Now, this is not at all to give more guilt, because this is not like, you need to touch your husband more because he's in it. No, not at all. It's just a fact to be aware of. So, but then men, on the other hand, need to learn that it's okay not for all touch to lead to sex.
Yes.
So there needs to be education on both ends. And then on the other hand, we also see that for men and for women, sex does different things. So for men, without even having like a word spoken, if there's no even communication happening, that physical touch will actually make them feel important, valued, cared for, loved, make them feel like they're doing a good job, which is really important for men. make them feel like they're making you happy, which is really important for men. So you can see how quickly things can get kind of out of control if there isn't proper communication.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting, even you just talking about that, I was thinking, because like full disclosure, especially after having Avery, my husband and I, we started scheduling sex because we're like, this is just not happening if we don't schedule it and don't make it a priority. And it's interesting you talking about the whole how we're brought up, how we're raised. In my husband's junior high school, if boys and girls were touching each other, a teacher would come in, intervene, and scold them, and potentially, depending on the situation, they'd get like a little bit of a detention if things escalated too much or anything like that. And so from a young age, like even we're like you, we're old married fogies, been together for a really long time too. And we started dating in high school. And even in high school, he was really hesitant to hold my hand in public, give me hugs in public. And it took him a really long time to be okay. And even still now, like he's not super public displays of affection kind of thing. And for the longest time that bugged me, because I am such like a huggy, lovey, touchy feely kind of person. Like I love snuggles and everything like that. And that was so hard for me until I recognized where this was coming from. And it really had nothing to do with me and him not wanting to touch me in public. It was just this deep-seated thing that we both needed to communicate more about and dive more into. So I love that. I love the direction that this conversation is going. So much good stuff. So let's kind of change gears a little bit here and talk a little bit about sex after having a baby. Because feeling sexy during pregnancy, after the whole birth experience, especially if your husband's there and he's witnessing it, sometimes it can be a little bit challenging for some women to feel sexy after that kind of experience. And they don't really want sex because, especially if they're nursing or their body isn't really working right after having a baby or things like that, they have a bit of shame or embarrassment, which they shouldn't have, obviously, but it's almost this ingrained feeling. So do you have some tips on helping us feel sexy again in the bedroom and wanting it more after having a baby?
Absolutely. So before I say anything, because I see this is so common, if you're having, I know this is one of your questions, but I just have to say it right now, is
Yes.
any pain
Yeah.
during intercourse, like it's not okay.
Yeah.
Like no, like we should all have a zero pain tolerance, because unfortunately in my line of work, I see this happen so often. And I even had a woman who years after her delivery, at the start of my program, I always say this, like if you experience pain, please go see your doctor. So she did, thankfully, and she turned out needing reconstructive surgery because she had such a bad stitch-up job.
Mm.
And so anyway, so that's just my like no pain allowed ever.
Yes.
And even though it's embarrassing to ask your doctor about that, we just I think we don't just do it for ourselves, but we do it for just the women all around the world, who maybe can't as well. So
Yeah.
So, the feeling sexy thing is really interesting because it is a bit of a shift. And I think after having children, it's actually such a great opportunity to just transform your sex life. So even though I think a lot of women are like, oh, like we have no time, I'm exhausted, I don't want him to touch my boobs, like just
Yes.
do, your organs are weird and shifted. But I think it's a great opportunity to just like stop a pattern that I see that you were probably in before anyways.
Yeah.
So it's a really good learning opportunity. That's so cliche. But how can you go from wanting to feel sexy, which is really performance-based,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
to actually being in your pleasure, which is internally based? So the sexy is the outward appearance. And when we get into that, we get really concerned with our jiggly tummies and our stretch marks and, our floppy boobs and the leaking and whatever comes along with that. And so we have to work so hard to conceal to make sure our angles are right and the lighting is right and all of that. And when we're in performance space, we are not at all in our bodies, we're in our heads.
Yes.
How do I sound sexy? How do I look sexy? And it's not at all about feeling. So transforming that into pleasure base is really slowing down enough to actually get into your body, which is just basically what you can do is start focusing on your five senses. So actually even I can give you a really actionable thing here is have your husband lay on the bed, have him just relax his body, close his eyes, make sure that he knows that like there are no goals. So like AKA don't be expecting orgasm and penetration out of this deal. And start to use your hands, start on his chest perhaps, and touch him for your pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So rather than thinking about, oh, he likes a tickly touch, he likes it when I touch his neck, he likes it when I want you to think about what you like. So do you maybe like the feeling of his chest hair on your palm?
Yeah.
Or do you like the warmth of his armpit? Yeah. Or do you want to slide your hand down his arm and just grab his hands and just hold his hands? And what you can do, because I find this actually can cause a lot of anxiety for women because we're so used to providing, is just set a timer. So just set a timer for like 10 minutes. That's all that's going to happen out of the deal. And just start practicing that. And that will get you out of the performance into the pleasure.
I love that. I love the difference because I think that, again, that kind of goes back to the whole cultural side of things where we feel like we need to perform. We feel like we need to be sexy. And it's like 6 weeks postpartum. We're like, okay, let's put on the lingerie and time for sex again. And it really doesn't have to be that way because I know for me, it was almost like, it was like sex after having my daughter, especially in those initial few months. It was like, it just wasn't feeling the way that it felt before, and I wasn't feeling confident, and it was just feeling not fun. And that's when I knew I had to explore what was going on, and ended up exploring what was going on more in my body, and ended up in this career path where it was just kind of like everything was intertwined. And I really love that you brought up that sex should never be painful, ever, ever, ever. This is something that is so common that I hear a lot, that people just assume, like much like incontinence after having a baby. A lot of moms think, oh, I had a kid, I pee myself now, that's just life. And it's like, no, that doesn't have to be your life. That should never be the case. You shouldn't have to live with this. So whatever kind of issues you're experiencing, definitely check out the doctor, go to pelvic floor physio or physical therapy, whatever you need to do to make the situation pleasurable, for sure. I love that. I love this conversation.
I had actually a thought before, and it's just a really short thought I haven't had before, so this is great, live on camera. Is that when you were talking about your husband in school almost being, so not only are they shamed for touching other boys,
yeah,
they're shamed for touching other girls in a non-sexual way.
Yes.
And then what us women are shamed for is feeling pleasure in the sexual experience.
Yes.
So here we have men who are feeling shameful about just touching to touch and enjoying it. And here we have women feeling shameful to touch in the bedroom. So there's two.
It's like that.
I promise this isn't deep, dark abyss of terribleness. Like there is like hope.
No, and I think that's the thing. Is that we need to, in order to heal, in order to make our relationships, our sex lives, everything better, we need to go through and drag out all the stuff from the closet that we haven't looked at in 20 years and deal with it, because you can't fully move forward if you don't fully forgive and let go of whatever you need to forgive and let go from the past, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it like that, I know you didn't mean this, but that sounded like, oh my God, that's like years and years of therapy.
Yes.
And it sounds so like painful and like hard.
Yes.
But I want to say yes, but also transformation can happen so quickly.
Yeah.
so quickly. And sometimes it just takes a little education and
Yep.
like everything switched, or one conversation, everything switched, or one good experience. And you're like, oh, that's even possible for me? Like
Yeah.
that's even reality? You know, like even that little exercise I shared is, I've seen so many women, it transforms, like I could touch him for my pleasure.
Yeah.
It's like a whole other world. And I'm just talking about his chest, but like you could touch his penis. Can I say all the words?
Yeah, you absolutely can.
So like you could touch him for
Yeah.
your pleasure. That's like blow your mind. And anyways, so ask me another question. Reel
Yes.
me in,
No,
Jenna.
I love it. I love it. I think that that's great. I think that what I'd love to do now, there's been so much goodness that has come out of this conversation. What I'd love to do now is give the women that are watching something actionable that they can take from this, that they can do right now. You've already given us the task of touching our men for our pleasure. Is there, once, say we do that, is there a next step that we can take, or is there something that we should do leading up to that to make that as enjoyable experience as possible? How can we take what we've learned from this and run with it, so to speak?
So many areas, so many ways I could take this answer. I think the first step is to prioritize your everyday pleasure.
Yeah.
Because I think, like I mentioned, men are in a touch deficit. I think it's not your responsibility, it's just a fact.
Yeah.
I think, and once you start scheduling sex and it becomes regular, but you're touching him for your pleasure, then he will get out of that. But I think, so men are in touch deficit, women are in a pleasure deficit.
Yeah.
Big time. And this isn't, self-care is great, but sometimes self-care can just become another thing on our to-do list that stresses us out. Like just another thing that we're failing at, that we're not doing. I'm not doing self-care. Where are my mud baths and my spas and my, meditation apps and stuff?
Yes.
So this is not self-care. This is more like in everyday life. There is like, I don't play video games. This is weird that I'm using this analogy, but I feel like when I was young, I played like Mario. Is that the guy who jumped up and down? And he like got like stars or something?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I feel like our life, there are stars, like and that's our essential, it's like a pleasure nutrient that we need. And what we need to do in everyday life is to get those stars. So this most simplest thing to do is to just not change anything at all. So for example, here I am, I'm sitting at my desk.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to change anything. I'm not going to spend any money.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start noticing what in my environment could bring me pleasure or brings me pleasure. So under my desk, this is actually a shed office. So it's like a little cold, but I have this beautiful heater like right under my desk. This radiant heater, and it feels gorgeous on my thigh right now. And my desk is actually the same aqua color, and it's my favorite color. And so I could just spend a moment just looking at the color. Or I have a big window here and behind the computer, and so I could just look out. I've got these big trees in my yard, and I could just for a moment just look at the trees like waving in the wind a little bit. So I have just got the star.
Yeah.
And I've filled up my pleasure meter a little bit. And so now when I go into the sexual experience, I'm not starting at like -15. I'm starting more like a 3 or a 4. And I've also practiced extracting pleasure without doing anything. I've also practiced using my 5 senses, my sight, my touch. There's nothing really good to smell in this room. Paint fumes.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So prioritize your everyday pleasure.
Yeah.
And then when you're in the sexual experience, you will have practiced that skill. And I want you to now, in the sexual experience, prioritize your pleasure. Your husband will be just fine.
Yeah.
In fact, he will be thrilled that you're prioritizing your pleasure.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And in all honesty, I'm a testament to that working, because after having a baby, once I did prioritize my own pleasure in the simple ways that you're talking about, lighting a delicious smelling candle, going for a walk by myself, like all these just different things that really didn't take much time or effort at all. My cup felt full and I didn't feel so cranky. And when it came to the sexual experience, I became more interested in myself getting pleasure out of it, which in turn gave more pleasure to my husband. And it was like this like win-win-win, stars everywhere kind of situation. It was fantastic. So which I take a lot of guidance from you. And so I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today, Jana. Let the folks know where they can find you to get more good information.
Probably the best way, I don't know when this is going to go up, and so I'm just working on my new website, so you can try the URL and see what happens.
Yes.
Maybe you can offer the link. So
absolutely.
My last name is very long, so janetdentonhouse.com. I normally have a hyphen in my name, but don't use the hyphen.
Perfect.
And then you also, maybe you could provide a link. I have a 1-page visual cheat sheet, 10 unexpected ways to get in the mood, where I share a lot of the tips that I've shared today. So if you don't want to take notes, then you can just go and grab that for free.
Awesome. Yay. Definitely do that. That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much, Jana.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.